host to the Elevate EHS Podcast, Hilary Framke. I have a new guest with me today. I've got Scott Davis. Hi, Scott.
Hello, Hilary. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today and chatting EHS.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it?
It is. We could talk about so many things, but let's start with what industries have you experienced in your career so far, and how have you seen the role of practitioners change over the years?
Wow, that's a loaded question when you're talking to the elderly. So electronics seems like probably the big portion of my career, close to 20 years in the electronics industry. I did some work for Lazy Boy, which is a furniture company. I like to say furniture, but it doesn't sound much like anything. Did some work there, did some work with the oil and gas folks. A lot of that was in the consultation world. They needed some EA. Did the same thing with the concrete precast world. That's building concrete bridges and underpasses and all those water works and stormwater stuff. Spent some time with those guys, then went into medical manufacturing. And no, it doesn't make much sense to go from a 200-ton concrete bridge to a 3-ounce catheter or needles and things in the medical industry. It's a big jump, but we tried to make it bigger. I left the medical industry and went into aerospace. So that was building wing skins for jets and subsonic helicopters and some crazy stuff with those guys.
Wow.
And then the automotive stuff. So I've always been touching back to automotive. They seem to have their fingers in both the electronics world. They're always close to an aerospace manufacturer of some sort, but all of these facilities are all manufacturing. I did work with a software company for some time, building a software platform for a water distribution system for an Indian reservation north up in Idaho. That was an interesting thing. So I've spent a little bit of time touching all sorts of strange things. As far as the role of the EHS practitioner, I think it's probably one of the few hot jobs right now. It seems like all manufacturing are looking for some type of EHS practitioner at some level. They're all learning what we all knew that was happening 15, 20 years ago, how important it is to keep people safe and obviously the environment. It takes manufacturing a little while. The larger companies chased it faster. The bigger the company, the deeper the pockets and the more roles they have within the EHS world. But it is huge right now. And obviously all the bells and whistles that go along with EHS.
I just feel I'm so blown away by how many different sectors of industry you've been in. Did you find, Scott, that there were similarities in the program implementation and the controls, or was there a lot of variation?
All of them had one thing in common that stands the test of time, is trying to keep people safe. And they all had their ways, or I would call their culture, in which they wanted to do that. They all are a little bit rough on environmental. They don't realize how much impact environmental has with their manufacturing businesses, but what they all had in common, unequivocally, is keeping people safe, because people on the floor make you money, and keeping them safe and healthy, it just pays for itself. It's a dividend every time someone comes to work feeling good and feeling healthy. So that's what they all had in common. But they all are very much different culturally, all the way to presidents that are just casual about it, to presidents that the first conversation they have at any staff meeting or not is they talk about safety. So those are the fun companies because they believe in your program. And I've been with 2 or 3 really good ones. That's all. They live and breathe EHS, and safety is the number one subject. So they're fun to work with because they believe in your program.
Yeah, that so accelerates your ability to improve things, right?
Completely accelerates it. Absolutely, every time.
It never ceases to amaze me. Now that I'm on the software side of things, I meet so many prospective clients and EHS practitioners, and you get to hear about their scope and who they have for resources. I was on a call today with a prospective client. I won't say who, but 85,000 employees and one EHS person. It wasn't a manufacturing sector, but still, it never ceases to amaze how under-resourced EHS is. I just looked at him and said, how do you do it? How do you keep up with 280 locations and 85,000 employees? He goes, I just don't. I can't. Nobody possibly could.
Yeah, the difference is it's the top of the food chain. They don't believe in it, so they're not believing in him. At the end of the day, that's what they're saying. It's just not that important, or we don't feel like it is that important. It doesn't influence us. So when a company of that size, of that stature says, this is all I got, it's sure not a priority. I can guarantee you that.
So let's shift gears a little bit and double click into EHS programs. In our prep call, we discussed the idea of integrating practices and especially around tools that you could use in EHS that would drive efficiency. So I'm thinking specifically about some lean methodology tools you had talked about. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about that and how they can take some other functions tools and apply them in EHS?
The companies that are looking for continuous improvement have always looked at lean, they've looked at Six Sigma, they've looked at any way to make their processes better, faster, cheaper. But what's fun about getting into these programs, especially the cultures that are listening, and I just had an opportunity because I was implementing their new ISO system / lean system, and ISO being the international standard like ISO 9000, QS 9000. All the aerospace companies are chasing it. But as a believer in lean and Six Sigma, what I was trying to do, and they were all on top of this because it just made the paperwork even better. What I mean by paperwork is that why not take our lean that we're already doing in those stand-up meetings that is a lean requirement. They call it a SCUDAC board, or they call it a run the business board. And one of the first sections is safety. Then you talk about quality, then you talk about delivery. And all of these are staples in the lean type manufacturing. Shingo knew it was the right way to do business. He believed in it. He's the guy from Toyota. But lean was more than that. It becomes the visual factory, showing people what the glove's supposed to look like, the safety glove, or what kind of glasses they should be wearing. But why not have it on a regular basis? So as we get that increased communication from the floor, have that stand-up meeting board, and on the board, the first thing we talk about is safety. So the way you improve the environment from the floor is get that information from the folks that are actually doing it, which is all your team members from the floor. So even moving from the stand-up meetings to the run the business board, all the way down to what we call the 5S project. So if you're familiar with lean, they use the term 5S. But the real companies take it one step further and call it the 6S project. So every Kaizen, every 5S project has a safety environmental element to it. And it's a wonderful way to, again, keep pushing the safety incentives and those environmental improvements right down to the floor. So lean already opens up the door. All you got to do is take advantage of it. I just think people forget the whole meaning of lean. It has to do with improving manufacturing, and the way we do that is to keep our people safe. So that's how we do it.
Scott, I'd love to pick your brain a little bit. So I've seen safety is covered, right? They've got the SCUDIP board, right? They're having these stand-up meetings, and I'll go sit in on them. But here's the classic, right? We get started, everyone's standing there and they go, okay, did we have any incidents last night?
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
right.
quality, and they move right on. So how do you make it more than just a check the box activity?
It'll always start out as a check the box. We're human and we're already a little bit bored, but add another little element to your safety side. There's 4 sides to the box that they rotate, and make more engagement. One way of doing it is that we started to talk about has IDs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road. But the beauty is the board is that engagement. So we created an engagement sheet that says, here's all the team members' names, and did they find any has IDs for the month? So boy, do they want to be right. The way they don't want to not have that board filled out. And then we put a big safety S. You can put an S, you can put a cross. So they have to color in the day before, if it was a true safety day that didn't have any incidents like a first aid or to that level. They don't want to be wrong, and they want the board to be filled out. Even at the elementary level, when you want to hand your paperwork in to the teacher, you want it filled out correctly. So give them something to fill out and not make it just check the box, but more importantly, engagement from the floor. So you have to get a little tricky. Sometimes you have to get a little fun with it. and they have to fill out that the employee member has to come in and cross that little X off that he or she found a hazard of some sort or even an opportunity for improvement. But the point of it is Lean wants you to engage the floor. Sometimes you have to be, I don't know, the right word isn't tricky.
Yeah, creative.
It's just an engagement sheet. So to try to get away from that, check the box, giving them something to do.
I think that's great advice. So finding, if all they're talking about is incidents and you're not having any, give them some other KPIs, right? Like
absolutely,
corrective
absolutely.
action closures, incident investigations reported on time.
Absolutely.
Talk me through the last investigation.
On-time delivery, all that can fall right into the HAZ-ID world. Yes,
Exactly.
ma'am.
And then I really like your idea about getting creative. I think we don't do this enough. And like you said, it can sound a little elemental, but there's something to be said about building up themes too for the year and focusing in on specific risk profiles every month. Now, ASSP and NSC comes out with a lot of themes, right? You can either tack onto that or you can do something more customized. But I think if you're not getting any data and they're not having conversations, you need to give them something to talk about, right? So saying, hey, this month is electrical safety month. Here's what we're going to focus on. Week 1 is going to be cords. Week 2 is going to be panels. Week 3 is going to be whatever, right? And give them actual topics. And you'll find that all of a sudden, like you said, HAZ-IDs pop up.
So we started what they call a 12-month calendar. And in the 12-month, every 30 days is a new subject. Not only do we train to through an LMS system, some type of system that holds all of our videos, but it's all the same video, not only the division, but the company. So we're all talking the same thing. We also meet once a month with these high point teams or safety committees, and they have that same subject matter. So the subject stays alive for at least 30 days. It also increases knowledge on the floor. There's even take home knowledge, just learning about stuff you have happening on your own home, another way of engagement. All of those are great opportunities.
What about this? If you could pick one EHS program that's what we call a game changer in EHS, what would it be and why?
Years ago, they brought up the idea, this was one of those, probably some consultant came up with the term behavior-based safety. They had to give it an acronym that sounded really cool, BBS, but the reality is how do I engage the floor and how do I find all the things that they see and how do I get it on a piece of paper or how do I get that knowledge from his or her brain onto some type of board, piece of paper. Years ago, we talked about it. It started out to be like a near hit card or a near miss card, a catch card. Hey, I caught something and I write this down. So the idea is that whatever you find, whatever hazards you may see on the floor, guarantee you this is a game changer. And the frequency is what helps change the game. I've gone into companies where they only did this near hit program. All you had to do was do one a year, turn it into once a quarter. A couple companies ago, we moved it to once a month. So every single month, every single associate team member had to hand in a HAZ-ID form that really talked about opportunities for improvement and or safety problems. And we had to open them and close them. And we were trying to help with the volume of them. So we found an opportunity with a software that you could actually type it in and be a little bit more efficient about getting them there. But more importantly, we got all those HAZ-IDs. You're talking about 200 of them in a month. You needed to be able to have a database of some sort to manage them. And then you could do other things. So if they were really important, you could create notification or notifiers in the system that would actually send that to the appropriate people. Lots of ways to change the game. But the best thing I've seen that really helped pull the energy from the floor was a behavior HAZ-ID type system that allows the team members to not only be affected, but now they're a part of the safety program automatically, and they're finding issues out and we're listening. So there you go.
I think at first it was try and get as many as we can, right? And now, okay, we're getting this huge influx. And especially once we set a KPI around it and people feel like they have to, right? Now there's a bunch of non-value added identifications, right? These aren't
So
hazards.
that's a learning curve. And yes, you're right. I seen a pencil on the floor and I picked it up.
Yes.
And here's what I told the VPs and presidents of the company. I don't care. And that blew their minds. What do you mean you don't care? And I go, I don't care. If I can get them communicating, I'll take 18 pencils a year. And then he finds one good one. But we have to keep encouraging this behavior. So worrying about the pencils, and let's just keep an eye on the system, and the system will take care of itself. And yes, you can go to that employee and say, quit looking at pencils or dropping a pair of scissors down. You're going to find those employees anyway, but that's just human nature. The guys that don't want to do it don't want to do it. But what we can do eventually is get to the point where we let those people know that this is a part of your performance objective and that you must have at least 90% of them worthwhile. And we can do that later, but to initiate a program like this, just get them talking. You need to be gentle for a while. And there are the naysayers in a good portion of this. But at the end of the day, that's what supervisors and leads are for. And we can't keep talking about pencils on the floor. I get that. But it's a start. You've got to get them talking. And eventually you'll be surprised what those guys will end up finding. And then they complain that it doesn't get closed fast enough. I think it's almost like we need to give them something to complain about. Then they feel better about themselves sometimes. But in general, I'd say at least 95% of the folks on the floor want to do this and they want to do it right. They don't want anybody to get hurt either.
It's a great response, Scott. And I think it's something that EHS practitioners, we sometimes get in our own way with these sorts of obstacles mentally, right? Oh, now this isn't working because I'm getting all of this crud that's useless to me and now I'm having to wade through the water. But your point is so well taken. I think it's worth it to get one great one, isn't it?
Right.
Like you said, give me the 18 pencil on the floor. If they care, they feel that we're listening to them, and they make an identification that adds value.
So that's exactly right. But you do have the plant managers, they get so production driven that they don't need to do one more thing. And you do. And safety is going to be continuous and you need to get used to dealing with it. Has IDs are probably the best form. The next one is maybe right after that. You talked about what are the things that might change things, is engaging the supervisors into what we call an audit or a layered audit. And it's a requirement that is a pre-checklist that they have to go out. I've automated this. I've done it the paper way. I've done it the automated way. But it really forces the supervisor to go out on the floor and look at specific subjects and to engage the floor. So they have to actually write the person's name down. I would tell you that you have a handful in manufacturing that I would call our desk auditors, and they don't want to get out on the floor. They don't even like people, but they're a supervisor, and it pushes them back out on the floor. And what a wonderful way. It's just 8 questions, and they have to go out on the floor and ask those questions on their own floor. I was fascinated at how well that worked. And it's considered the monthly audit or a layered audit. You can call it all sorts of things. And every supervisor has to go out into his or her area and ask these questions.
I really like the idea of that. It's almost like a focused inspection and a behavior-based audit at the same,
all at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, I've never considered that or seen that. And
well, I'm charging for that, so you can't. That's not a freebie. So.
Okay, royalties out to Scott for anyone who steals that idea. But I can see why that would add so much value because, like you said,
it does.
It gets them thinking, it gets them talking. They find those specific instances. It might be ergonomic identifications or machine guarding gaps. I mean, you could go after specific risk profiles. What a great idea. Thank you for sharing. Let's shift gears again. I would love to hear more thoughts. You mentioned on technology that you're seeing this usage, right? And you're seeing it make it easier to review lots of data like hazard identifications and extrapolate that on the back end, do some report summaries. You've been in your career in a time when technology has really advanced over the years. So in what ways do you see technology continuing to shape EHS programs?
It's changing it extramentally. So what I mean by that is, I am not kidding you. I got excited that we could actually send pictures of the employee working to the doctor that was on the case so they could see that the employee was safe.
Yeah.
And I went through, for lack of better words, absolute hell trying to figure out how to do that. Because the computers were so slow and we were so slow. But the joke of it was, when it happened, the doctor called me up laughing how cool this was, that she was getting pictures of the employee doing the work. And she says, no, this is not work related. And I was like, wow, there's a milestone. I didn't write it down. I didn't take pictures myself. I just remember that technology has done things that I would have never, ever told you that we could have done in the EHS business. So I'm a big fan. I think there's opportunities for it everywhere. Simply just getting the way the computer software handles that type of data to electronic devices that can communicate from the floor. There's a lot of great companies out there that have come up with some really cool tools. What I mean by tools is that they can activate and alert people in certain situations way more efficient than they used to. I used to love the idea of a pager, but now you can literally get it to your phone. And all these different softwares they have nowadays, there's a beautiful app for them. So you can literally have a phone style software that does all the things during your audits, has IDs, and then the paperwork itself. Record keeping alone has probably been the larger milestone. Back in the day, I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was because it was a while ago, but record keeping was just files. It was folders of stuff. But what people forget, and I've had very large companies throw years of paperwork away that they shouldn't have ever thrown away, because a good portion of record retention falls, especially for medical files and hazardous waste manifest. You're basically keeping them forever. It says 30 in the books, but just keep them forever, because the reality is you don't know what's going to happen. And I have been in those situations where the EPA's called me and asked me about my waste manifests, having them available, or somebody calling 5 years later and saying they've got medical problems and they're blaming the manufacturer for it. So technology has been monumental in my business where I've grown up, and all of those are the best examples I could give you, with not only record keeping, but obviously handling all that data. So there you go.
And AI, I think, has the potential to revolutionize finding the insights and pulling out the trends. And I hope we're going to see more and more of that relational, because I think there's so much relational data that exists within EHS. For instance, risk assessment scores against incident occurrences, events that are happening, against inspection questions that you're asking, right? All these are interrelated programs that I would love to see AI start to pick out some insights. It's interesting that having your most trending incident in assembly is hand injuries, but you're not looking at any machine guards or struck by things in your inspection criteria in that area. Starting to see those connections. I hope AI will take us there.
I do too.
Where do you envision, what do you think, with all that you've seen in EHS and where it was and where it's going, what emerging trends do you think will transform our practice?
I'm going to tell you what I don't think it's going to transform. I think that's always going to need people. I think the industry is always going to need that body on the floor. As long as we've got humans performing human tasks, it's going to take a human to find out what they're doing. I've seen some technology that tried some ergon attempts to actually follow the human movement, but it's very difficult because it doesn't always catch everything. So I still think that's going to happen. I think universities are still struggling with the correct curriculum. I think they want to give out a degree in EHS or in health or in safety, and they're missing a lot of things. I think they're creating a curriculum. I actually had one university kid that just finished with their MBA and hadn't even been using Excel to use that I needed her to be able to do on a lockout tagout. And she said, I haven't really used much Excel. And I was like, wow, okay. So that was fascinating because she'd been doing schoolwork so much, there's never been a need to use Excel. I think it's still evolving. I think there's a bigger need for EHS, but I think companies grab anybody that says they have experience with it, but they really don't interview them properly and get people that really have the knowledge and the background to really keep things moving forward. Cleaner, simpler softwares out there. I think that's going to happen. I think there's been some monster software releases out there that was developed for large companies, but they've never properly sized it. I think sizing software for these smaller companies is the way to go. I think trying to sell them a full enterprise system, which is just parsing off, taking pieces of the original software and trying to sell it. They don't need a lot of extra stuff. They just need something to get the job done that you can add to later. And
software that fits the company versus
I think
the
they
company
need,
fit the software.
They're always trying to sell the large software because that's what they have. And I think it's not properly sized. And I don't know that most companies even know how to use it properly in regards to record keeping and understanding of that stuff. And then I think the big one that I think really needs to happen, because I still think they're missing the boat on these learning management systems, the LMS type systems. They're good, but they still have shortcomings. They can't do all that I'd like them to do. And I have never found one that could. And I looked at numerous ones, both an EHS softwares to LMS softwares. I think that is probably the trend because of record keeping practices, or they're learning about that. And more importantly, getting people out on the floor that really understand EHS. So hopefully that'll push it to the right practice down the road.
That's amazing. I love those responses, especially the one about how we're training EHS professionals. I struggled with that so much when I became an executive in EHS with two aspects, right? One, finding the right person with the right experience for the role, because as EHS is so broad and people will call themselves an EHS leader, but only really know environmental and only certain topics. Or maybe they're just very safety heavy and they don't know any of the environmental topics, right? So very hard to find someone who's balanced. And then the other side of it is the application piece that you're talking about. Like you have an MBA, but you don't know how to do a basic quantitative risk assessment.
I found too that all the universities do not teach injury management. Zero. I had a class, I've been co-oping for years with the universities. And I had 6 students that had finished their 4-year degree, and 3 of them were doctors that were trying to get this MBA health certificate. And not one of them understood injury management with regards to understanding if you're self-insured or if you're not self-insured, how that affects the people on the floor, how that data comes in, whether you're insured or not insured, how much you're insured to, and then the management itself from the clinic side to the interfacing with the doctors, bringing the doc. They have not a clue. None of them have actually done it. And that's 10 students, I'd tell you, over the last probably 5 years, maybe more, that had never been taught anything about injury management, which is the essence of safety. If you don't know how to handle the injury at the floor level, what's going to happen when they leave and go home after they've been injured? They're not taught that at all. I even actually offered to teach the class at the university so I could have students that actually understood injury management. That's been a lot bigger hole in what you call the transformation part, because they're not transferring that at all. That's something they pick up when they get there.
Yes. And I still think that EHS practitioners with only experience are still undervalued. Right?
Oh, yeah.
We're looking far too much at what letters do you have after your name, what education,
Yes.
but
Yes,
Do not underestimate those dark horses who spent their years in the fields and they've
right.
seen application and they've been deep in the trenches and they
Yeah.
know the different tools. Those are some of the best EHS leaders I've ever met.
That would be 100% true. During my interviews with any of these folks, I asked them of anybody ever actually brought in, and numerous ones have to do with injury management, which has to do with workers' compensation or clinic interface and doctors and where the boundaries are and where they're not, getting them on the floor, keeping them on the floor, looking at what a recordable actually is. It is such a front end of the safety program, and not one of these health and safety MBAs actually had any of those classes.
On the cusp of that, what advice would you give emerging EHS professionals looking to make a significant impact in their career?
If I'm the EHS guy, I'm a coordinator on the floor and I'm trying to pack the floor, it's always going to be about communication. And if you're bored, more communications. You can't get enough on the floor. You can't, but you got to get them listening. And the only way you're going to get them listening is you got to start with that general manager, that plant manager. If they believe it, it will happen. The funnest place to work on the planet is when your general managers wanting to know what's going on the floor with regards to safety and what can he do to help. When that happens, the energy just pushes across the floor of wildfire. But the last thing you need to do is work with a company and they expect you to be the EHS cop or the safety cop. It's those types of companies you really need to steer away from. If I was advising anybody during that interview, they should be talking about how they do it from the top down and the bottom up. But it's never about the safety guy. If that's the first words that come out of that plant manager and general manager's mouth, they're not looking for an EHS program. They're looking for a safety cop. There's my advice.
I think those are some difficult climates to work in. Extremely hard to get a level of success when everyone is worried about you coming out and doesn't want you to watch them and thinks you're just out to get them.
My favorite one, I'll tell you a fun story just to share this, is that the employee went to HR to complain about me. And the HR guy said, why? And he says, there's snow on the parking lot and I fell. And I loved his comment. He goes, Scott didn't make it snow. But he fell because of me, not because he walked onto a bad spot or there was ice. The moment I heard that HR guy say that, I damn near cried. It was so damn funny because it was like, wow, that's the answer of all. Employees do that all the time. It's got to be somebody else's fault if they get hurt. And it's going to be the safety guy's problem. And when companies go running at the safety guy, what did you do? Wow, it's not a me thing. So those types of programs are tough to be around. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you got to have that shared ownership, that shared accountability, right? For we all own the risk here. We all own the controls, the program, right? I am happy to be your technical expert and to help and to guide and to take our program to the next level. But when something goes awry, it's all of us. It's a we problem. Yeah. We're all going to participate. We're all going to work to make it better. Those are the best environments. I agree with you. Scott, it has been a consummate pleasure to have you here on the episode. Thank you so much for all that you've done for the field. So many contributions, so many industries, so much over the course of your career, your teaching, your co-ops, you're a true thought leader. So thank you for everything that you've done for EHS.
No problem. Call anytime.
And listeners, we'll see you next time. Bye,
Take
everybody. Care.